is Monica, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to this frosty winter wonderland. In today's tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to make this turtleneck sweater. You can make it as a sweater dress length like I did, or you could just make it as a regular sweater length if you just want a turtleneck shirt. The process is going to be pretty much the same. I really hope you enjoy this one. It's the perfect thing to make to keep you warm and cozy during these really cold winter days. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a cup of hot cocoa and get inside, and let's get sewing. To make this turtleneck, I used about 2 yards of a medium weight sweater knit fabric, although you'd use a bit less if you were making it a shirt length. And it's important to use stretch fabric so you can get it on and off over your head. You'll also need a long sleeve shirt that fits you well to use as a template. To begin, find the curved seams of the armholes and fold one of the sleeves into the center of the shirt, adjusting it along that seam so you can see the shape of the armhole like so. Do the same with the other sleeve so your shirt looks like a tank top. Then fold the shirt in half down the center, and this is our bodice pattern. Fold a portion of fabric over a little wider than the shirt, making sure the fabric will stretch in the direction the arrows are going so the sweater will stretch around you once it's done. Smooth it out, and if you're using striped fabric, line up the stripes for a symmetrical look. Lay the shirt onto the fabric so the folds line up and pin it down. We have to cut a high neckline for the turtleneck, so if your shirt's neckline comes to the top of your neck, which is how mine is, cut a 1/2 inch higher than the shape of the neckline to add seam allowance. If your neckline is any lower, just make sure to cut it high like this so it'll work for the turtleneck. Next, cut a 1/2 inch larger for seam allowance along the shoulder, armhole, and side, although if you're making a dress like I am, angle your cutting to get a bit wider as you go down to allow room for your hips. Finally, if you're making a shirt, cut an inch lower than the bottom edge for hem allowance, and if you're making a dress, cut it to whatever length you'd like, adding an inch for hem allowance as well. Remove the shirt and unfold the fabric, and you'll have a bodice cut out that looks like this, although yours would be shorter if you're making a shirt. Then cut a second identical bodice, matching up the stripes for a cohesive look. Lay them together with the correct sides of the fabrics facing together, and pin and sew along the shoulders and sides using a 1/2 inch seam allowance for all your seams. Since we're using stretch fabric, use a ballpoint needle and sew everything with either a stretch stitch or a zigzag stitch, which will allow your seams to stretch without breaking. To make the actual turtleneck, turn the bodice right side out and measure the distance around your neckline. Mine was 14 inches. Add 1 inch to your number to add seam allowance, so I got 15 total. Cut a rectangular piece of fabric that measures the number you just calculated wide by 7 inches high, making sure the fabric will stretch horizontally. Fold it in half with correct sides together and pin and sew along the side. Open up and flatten out the seam allowance so it lays neatly. Then fold the fabric down in half to create the turtleneck. You'll have a fold along the top edge and 2 raw edges at the bottom. Lay the turtleneck so the folded edge is facing down and position its seam on the center back. Lay the bodice inside out, measure to find the center back of its neckline, and use a straight pin to mark that point. Slide the turtleneck down into the bodice so the correct sides of the fabrics face together and the raw edges of both pieces line up around the neckline. Match up that center back pin on the neckline to the center back seam on the turtleneck and pin them together, making sure you're pinning all 3 layers of fabric. Then pin in smaller increments around the rest of the neckline, always opening up and flattening out the seam allowances when you pin anything together. And pinning often is important to keep all 3 layers of fabric together when sewing. Sew around the neckline to join the pieces, so now your turtleneck is attached to the bodice. To make the sleeves, lay your shirt so the sleeve is straightened out, where this top straight edge is the folded edge of the sleeve, and this curved seam where the sleeve and armhole are sewn together looks like half of a bell shape. Lay a see-through piece of paper like tracing or tissue paper down so the straight edge is lined up along the folded edge of the sleeve. Trace the sleeve shape by following along that curved bell-shaped seam, the diagonal edge of the sleeve, and the bottom edge, and make sure to write on the pattern where the folded edge was. Remove the shirt and add new lines a ½ inch larger than your sleeve shape to add seam allowance on the curved and diagonal edges. We'll be adding cuffs to the bottom of the sleeve later, so we don't need seam allowance there. Cut along these new lines to cut out your pattern, which will look like this. Fold a portion of your fabric over, lay your pattern onto the fold, and pin it down. Cut around the sleeve shape, remove the pattern, and unfold your fabric so you have one sleeve cut out, then cut a second sleeve. Fold them in half with correct sides together and pin and sew along the diagonal edges, then turn them right side out. Use straight pins to mark this point at the top of the curve on each sleeve, which is where they'll sit at your shoulders. To attach them to the bodice, turn the bodice inside out. Flip the sleeve over and slide it wrist first in through the armhole so the correct sides of the fabrics face together and the raw edges line up around the armhole. Match up the point you marked with a pin on the sleeve to the shoulder seam on the bodice and pin them together. Then match up and pin the underarm seams of both pieces together as well. Line up the curved raw edges and pin them together more frequently around the rest of the armhole to prepare them for sewing. When they're completely pinned, sew around the armhole to join the pieces and your sleeve is attached. Then attach the other sleeve the same way. To make the sleeves cuffs, cut off the bottom 2 inches of the sleeves. Once we add the cuffs on, the sleeves will be the correct length again. And since we just cut off the back stitching, sew right over the end of the seams again to secure the stitches so they don't unravel. Measure the distance around the bottom of your sleeve. Mine is 8 inches, and add 1 inch to your number for seam allowance, so I got 9 inches total. Cut out 2 rectangles for the cuffs, although I'm just showing one here, that measure the number you just calculated wide by 6 inches high. Fold it in half with correct sides together and pin and sew along the edge. Open up and flatten out the seam allowance, then fold the cuff down in half just like you did for the turtleneck. Turn your sleeve right side out, lay the cuff so its folded edge is facing up toward the sleeve, and position the seams of both pieces on the same side. Slide the cuff around the sleeve, lining up all the raw edges of fabric around the bottom, and match up and pin the seams together. Pin more often around the rest of the sleeve, and sew to join the pieces together. Flip the fabric down so you have a cuff at the bottom of the sleeve, and repeat that process on the other sleeve. To finish, we have to hem the bottom edge of the sweater. To do so, turn it inside out and fold the bottom edge over a ½ inch once, then fold it over again another ½ inch and pin it down. Repeat that process of double folding and pinning around the entire bottom edge, then sew with a wider stretch or zigzag stitch to secure the hem. And now your sweater is ready to keep you warm this winter. Thanks for watching and happy sewing! Oh, cover the camera, snow's blowing. Why do I always get the brilliant idea to film in the weirdest weather conditions like this freezing cold snow? Okay, gloves are coming on. Sweater length? Whoa, the snow is blowing. I just dropped my belt in the snow.